Good day. My name is Hunter Carpenter, Senior Director of Public Policy for the Agricultural Retailers Association. Welcome to the third in a series of webinars ARA is hosting in coordination with CPDA, the Council of Producers and Distributors of Agrotechnology. The goal of this webinar is to develop a uniform industry adjuvant education program for the ag retail industry to help growers understand how the selection and use of the proper adjuvant will improve their overall crop protection program. This webinar will give a continued look at the individual categories of adjuvants, a review of what surfactants are and what they do as tank mix adjuvants, explain the different types, when to use, and how to optimize performance. Today's webinar is titled Using Surfactants, Stickers, and Silicones to Protect Your Chemical Investment. Today's featured speaker is Joe Godnowski, Director of Education, Adjuvant Development for CPDA. Joe recently retired from a long career at Winfield United and is widely recognized throughout the agrotechnology industry for establishing uniform definitions and standards for adjuvants used with crop protection products. He holds 38 U.S. and international patents on the composition of new agricultural adjuvants, wind tunnel design, and application technology, and is the author of numerous scientific publications on these topics and has conducted extensive research on the impact of spray nozzles on droplet distribution and the impact on pesticide performance. We would also like to thank Stepan Agricultural Solutions for sponsoring today's webinar. Thank you very much. Certified crop advisors attending this webinar will earn one Certified Crop Advisor CCA program IPM CEU. At the completion of this webinar, a QR code will be displayed to scan from your mobile device. And for our California-based attendees, we will provide instructions on how to access a short quiz, which is required by the California Department of Pesticide Regulation. We would also like to take this time to thank the CPDA Advisory Working Group and acknowledge their contributions in helping plan this series of webinars for our attendees. Thank you for all of your hard work. I will remind everyone that Joe plans to take Q&A at the end of the webinar. You may submit questions using the Q&A function provided by the Zoom webinar application. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website at aradc.org. Webinar recordings and slides are made available to all ARA members after the live webinar can be accessed on the member homepage. If you need help logging in, email info@aradc.org. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Joe Godnowski with CPDA for today's presentation. Joe?
Thank you, Hunter, and thank you, the friends at Stepan for sponsoring this. We really appreciate that. So today we're going to talk about, and I was telling Hunter, this is kind of a boring topic. Nobody thinks highly of the value of the surfactants, stickers, and silicones, yet they're vitally important to making our herbicides, insecticides, and fungicides work well, but because of their relative low cost per acre and such, they're not thought of as quite as valuable, but they are. So we're going to talk today about why we need surfactants, stickers, and silicone adjuvants. We're going to talk a little bit about the types of surfactants. We're going to talk about why non-ionic surfactants are primarily recommended, especially with herbicides. We're going to talk about what type of problems that they can solve and why does a grower or applicator need to use them. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. So one of the big problems with the carrier that we use to apply our herbicides, our insecticides, and fungicides is they're going out with water. And the inner surface energy or surface tension of that water creates lots of problems. You can see the spider's able to sit right up on top. You see the contact angle there of when you put a water droplet on. Next slide. And when we're putting on a $30, $40, $50 herbicide program, and you see all of it setting on the leaf surface like this, or ready to drip off, of leaf particles and leaf hairs and such, you kind of see why we really need a surfactant system in here to get any hope of getting our products successfully on the plant or into them. Next slide. So as I mentioned, water tends to not stay on plant surfaces well. I think all of you know, like you say, if you got a freshly waxed car in a light rain, you'll see all those beads sitting on top. You get any kind of speed up on your car or your truck, and they simply just slide right off. And that's the same problem that we have with our applications of herbicides, insecticides, fungicides. They tend to not want to stay on that plant surface. They can bounce off, they can shatter, or they can simply just run off the leaf, like you see on the slide on the right. Especially now when we've created such large droplets for some herbicide applications, those large droplets, because they have more energy, they're heavier, when they hit a surface, they tend to splatter tremendously. So we've just added to our problems by using much larger spray droplets. Next slide. So in essence, nothing covers or stays on a plant better than oil does. And because oil lacks that energy that water uses to hold itself together. So oil is a big help, but many of our herbicides don't want oil with them. And then also, of course, oil doesn't mix in water. You got to have an emulsifier system or surfactant system to do that. Next slide. So I'm not going to go into a lot of technical details on this, but the surfactants kind of bridge that area by having both water-loving characteristics and oil-loving characteristics. And there's terms like HLB that design that so people building surfactants can hedge that surfactant system to work better with oil-loving herbicides by having more of that portion, or water-loving herbicides. So in essence, most of the time we want to kind of balance that, so we got a little bit of both. So we'll still go into the water, but that oil-loving tail helps us out by spreading out the water droplet. Next slide. Well, as you look at it, those water ends go right into the water end, and the oil sticks out. And the slide over on the left then shows by adding that surfactant system, it will spread out your droplet. And then the key, of course, is how much do we want it to spread out? But that's part of the art of those of us building surfactant systems and matching them with individual herbicides. So you see, we take the water droplet from a beaded up state to one that's spread out, covering considerably more surface area on that particular leaf. Next slide. So there's several different types, surfactant stickers and silicones. The non-ionic surfactants are the workhorse of the surfactant business with many herbicides. They enhance the spreading, they enhance wetting, and they're also good at both turf and soil wetting as well. So the non-ionics are really the workhorse here. The more specialized silicone surfactants are very helpful if you want to maximize coverage, reduce spray bounce, and give you leaf tissue penetration. So they'll tremendously, at a lower rate, increase that surface spray. Stickers are often overlooked, I think, especially in row crop ag. In specialty ag, where people are paying more attention to the detail on what they're putting on, and they're putting on a lot of fungicides and such that they want to stay there a long time. But they create wash-off resistance, evaporation reduction, and some UV protection. So stickers are very important. I think greatly underutilized, under-researched probably in row crop ag. And then the anti-ionic surfactants are another one system that are used primarily as compatibility agents. Soil cresting, harvest aids, You often won't see anything referred to as an anionic surfactant, but those are what are used in compatibility agents, essentially. Next slide. So where do I know what to do? And therein lies the problem. How do I know which one to use, when to use it, and how much to use? And that's always the issue. First consideration is to take a look at the pesticide label. And they're a lot harder to read now than when I started in the industry. You got to search, even though when I know where I'm looking for, it can take me some time to find that surfactant recommendations piece in there. But they all have one that will tell you what to use and when to use it. And other times they imply what you should use, which isn't helpful for novices trying to do this when you're first trying to get into this. But we'll talk about that a little bit. But it's important to follow the label requirements, because if you have a problem, it's best to have followed the rules on that, as we all know. Next slide. Often labels will tell you, use a non-ionic surfactant at 0.25% volume per volume, and that's all clear and fine and good. And then we know exactly what to do. However, many labels imply the use of surfactants. So they'll say spray coverage should be uniform and complete. Well, if I'm putting on a herbicide, what does that mean? How do I know what to do? That's where your experts in the field that are advising you on your adjuvants or selling them need to help you out on some of these. Other labels will say thorough spray coverage is important. Well, yeah. Spray mixtures must be compatible. Well, we kind of know that, but usually we don't find it out until after it's a problem. Coverage must be maximized. And you'll see this on a lot of labels where they're not recommending adjuvants. They want you to cover the plant, but they don't do very well and tell you exactly how to do that. Use a coarser droplet to minimize drift. Well, what does that mean? And then avoid spray droplet bounce. Well, how do you do that? So we're going to talk about a few of those things, but these implied ones are important, especially if you've got a set of a herbicide program or fungicide and insecticide program that are using, and a lot of people have things that they really try to utilize a wide amount of acres. It's really important to look on these and get some help to do it right. Next slide. Second considerations, is it a contact herbicide or a systemic herbicide? And most of these are laid out in the modes of action. Obviously, a contact is going to be, you want to cover the leaf surface thoroughly. It's going to be more susceptible to wash off. It needs a surfactant that increases the coverage. And generally, you don't need or want leaf absorption here. You want them to stay on the surface. Systemic herbicides, not quite as susceptible to wash off, unless it's, of course, immediate rain or something, then it still could be. But these are less responsive to increased coverage, but they need your help in getting maximum absorption enhancement. Next slide. Basic types of adjuvants. We generally only hear about non-ionic because that's what's specifically mapped out on many herbicide labels. But in the surfactant business, we have cationic systems, anionic systems, and non-ionic, which basically is the charge that is in that surfactant system, just like in a battery. It's got a positive and negative. Next slide. So if you got using both an anionic and a anionic system on a cationic system, they attract each other. So they'll tie up each other. One of the problems we have with water conditioners, we've got charged herbicides that are attracted to the ions that are in the spray tank. And so we deal with that. And we're going to deal with that in the next webinar where we talk about water conditioners. And then, of course, anionic surfactants, like charges, will repel each other. Next slide. So thus, most herbicides will recommend a non-ionic system. because an ionic system may attract or repel other things in the spray mixture, and therefore can cause compatibility problems and settling out, which is all bad. But the non-ionics tend to mix with everything. They don't interfere and with uptake or absorption. So application or efficacy problems are solved by using non-ionic surfactant systems. Next slide. Most surfactants, as I mentioned, use spray agents are non-ionic. They want to reduce compatibility problems. They also tend to be less, have less toxicity to fish, less potential for eye and skin irritation. So from a handling standpoint, a lot better for everyone. And then a less chance for tie up in soil or hard water. In essence, they don't react. So that's why most herbicide labels that recommend surfactant are going to say you use an anionic system. Next slide. Surfactant system. So second to oil, there's the most common on-label recommendations. Often they'll say use an oil and an anionic surfactant system. They're often described on the label as an 80-20 or a 90-10 system. And that's the most common, as I said. They're also used in irrigation aids and wetting agents for soil and stuff. Normal use rates, relatively low as 6 ounces per 100 gallons to a quart per 100. Typical use rates on most labels are around that 0.25% or a quart per 100 gallons. And often adding too much doesn't really continue to be beneficial, other than if you got a high oil content system, then a little more may help. But generally, you're not going to reduce the surface tension more by adding tremendously more. Next slide. So the other topic we're going to talk about briefly is silicones, and these are really specialized. Again, they're more often used in the specialty crops where people know exactly what they're doing, especially putting on a lot of fungicides and mineral-based fungicides and such. The silicones help more, but they're capable of enhancing tremendous spreading and absorption through the plant surface. Relatively low use rates, even though they're very relatively expensive, the low use rates can overcome some of the cost of that. They're helpful in both the systemic and in contact type pesticides. The big flaw that a lot of people give them on the herbicides often is that they spread out and they dry out too fast. So you need to overcome that at the same time. Also used with PGRs and some foliar nutritionals and specific adjuvants. So important topics to know about. Talk about to your adjuvant experts about this, when and where you should use your surfactant systems. Next slide. So anionic systems, negatively charged surfactants. And again, you're rarely going to see this on the label or anybody talk about them. But if they're used for dispersion effects and compatibility with many of your compatibility agents, they're using anionic systems. Next slide. Stickers, as I mentioned before on the opening slides, I think they're overlooked in row crop ag. I do think they could help us quite often. They form a film to help merge with the plant surface to retain and keep the active on there. They're often used with a surfactant system to help spread them out a little more. And their pinene resin, starches, latex are often used. Again, useful in preventing wash off, keeping some of your older chemistries, copper, your manabs, chlorothalonil, carbaryl, those kind of things, keeping them on the leaf longer to work as contact pesticides. And they can also help in preventing UV light degradation of the product you're trying to put on. Next slide. Surfactant silicone sticker use rates. Again, we talked their wide use range. That's why you got to look specifically at the label to see what they want. And keep in mind, surfactants are meant to treat the carrier water, not the acre. And that kind of runs us into some problems because that use rate becomes a bit of a problem. So spray applications, volume per volume, is affected by the gallons per acre of water that you're putting on. And there lies another tremendous problem in that you're, if you are using rate per acre, you double your volume, you're cutting your surfactant rate in half if you're putting it on an acre basis. Next slide. So here's kind of the summary of that. And the problem we have with using volume per volume is that it greatly affects the cost of the product that we're talking about. And it also affects how much surfactant you're getting out of the herbicide that you're putting on. So our best example here, if you got a quart per 100 gallons of a surfactant system or 0.25% volume per volume, at 10 GPA, you're getting 3.2 ounces. You're needing 3.2 ounces per acre. But if you take that to 20 gallons per acre, you've doubled the rate, you've doubled the cost. So we're making it easy math, $32 a gallon, that equals a quarter an ounce. So at 10 gallons, that's costing you 80 cents an acre. At 20, we're up to 160. So this, what I've seen in the industry, what this has caused people to do, they're using lower cost materials here when they're using higher spray volumes because they want to keep their costs down. The one thing that I've seen over the years, generally speaking, like everything, you get what you pay for. If you're paying a lot for a surfactant system, more than likely it's got more true surfactant in there, and that's why it costs more. So if you're going to a lower cost one that's got less true surfactant in it, that lower cost per gallon isn't helping you much. You may still be better off with the really good one and cutting it back if you're going to cut it back. The other problem with this volume per volume piece is if you're using a herbicide, we'll take glyphosate, for example, 32 ounces per acre. If it's got 10% surfactant in it, that's essentially 3.2 ounces. And with all the years of glyphosate alone, where people were using 10 gallons an acre, all is good. They were getting a consistent amount of surfactant in there. But now they want you to mix this with something that you want 20 gallons of water. That surfactant rate in the herbicide is basically cut in half. And that's why adding your non-ionic surfactant systems in these is critically important, because we're not getting surfactant out of the herbicides to be as valuable when we're doubling that gallons per acre. So keep that in mind. If you're going higher rates, gallons per acre, it's costing you more, but you're also getting less surfactant on an acre basis out of your herbicide. So you need to backfill that with non-ionic surfactant. Next slide. The 90-10 versus 80-20 non-ionic dilemma, as I've seen over the years. I wish it would have never happened, but the history of that, you go all the way back to 1966 when X77 first came on the market. It became the industry standard because essentially, or originally, it was the only one. 90% blend of non-ionics, ethoxylates, free fatty acids, and isopropyl alcohol. They had 10% water. So it, by default, became your 90-10 non-ionic surfactant. So it was the undefined standard. 90-10 does not mean it contains 90% surfactant. Very few do. They often contain a lot of other components and just have that 10% water, but the surfactant level is very likely less. And there are no rules in a knife fight. And so a 90-10, you fill up with a bunch of other stuff, it doesn't work as well. Could really only have 20-30% true surfactant. The other mythology was, and suddenly the 80% were less costly, but they're in the same boat. An 80% non-ionic could have 50% in, and a competitive 90-10 could have 40% for all you know. So again, I go back, it's not a strict rule, but generally speaking, if you go by a price point, you generally get what you're paying for. And the surfactant is truly the most expensive piece in that. And it's a competitive market. So most people, if they're charging you more for it, it's probably got more true surfactant. Next slide, please. So what if I need both? And in today's world where we do so many tank mixes, inevitably, you're going to end up with a label that requires a non-ionic surfactant, and you're going to require one that needs an oil. And so generally you need to mix those two. The surfactants are there for the wetting and the spreading, reducing spray bounce, get you more coverage, and the oils are in there for absorption and uptake. They're going to tend to evaporate less, and they're generally going to enhance your deposition and move it into the plant more effectively. So this is the problem today. You got to look at those labels and compare. Okay, I need both. Next slide. So that about almost probably 15 years ago, concept came out is, well, let's to bridge that. Can we create a combination of the two? And so that became the high surfactant oil concentrate, which is an emulsifiable oil of either, it can have a paraffinic oil or a crop oil concentrate type material or a methylated seed oil. So there's two versions of this. So that's the other thing you got to look at when you're looking at high surfactant oil concentrate. Is it paraffinic oil based or is it methylated seed oil based? So you got to look at that on the container as you're looking at it. But by definition, they need to be this, according to ASTM, they need 25 to 50% surfactant and a minimum of 50% oil. Commonly, these will be 40% surfactant and 60% oil is the most common place in the market today. And these are very good bridges when you have a mixture of the herbicide where you have a glyphosate, for example, plus a clethodim or a select type material. You need an oil in there for that oil-loving herbicide, but you still need the surfactant. These are a nice bridge into that. The recommended use rates are generally a 0.5% volume per volume, which is, if you look at a crop oil or MSO, they're almost double that. So these are going to cost you more money, but generally with most herbicides, not all, you can use them at half the use rate. So they may meet the needs of both the oil and surfactant on the adjuvant all-in-one product. So I like them a lot. You just have to work with your adjuvant expert you're getting your products from, and if these fit your needs, they're a good choice. Next slide. Growers, by definition, buy benefits, not features. And so what growers are looking for today is growers get bigger. Saving time is critical to them. If you can reduce the gallons per acre, you save time. If you can improve spray mixing compatibility, don't cause them problems, you save them a lot of time. And then any products that work to maximize efficiency and minimize the need for reapplication is going to save them that time. So part of our job in the adjuvant industry, what we really do for applicators is try and prevent and solve problems that ultimately save him save him time. Next slide, please. So again, goes back, what problems are we trying to solve? Mixing and compatibility. There are many new compatibility agents out that are helping that. As we continue to put more and more things in that spray tank, this is a huge problem, and getting help in solving those as we're trying to put 2, 3, 4 herbicides, insecticides, fungicides in the tank, plus a micronutrient system, plus a biological. These are issues that you really need to be working with your people on to make sure you have things in hand that'll help you there. Preventing wash off due to rain or irrigation. We have products that help there. Reducing spray droplet bounce. We talked a little bit about that. One is get the right spray droplet size is really important, but also adding your surfactants in there can do that. Improving coverage is difficult. And then enhance or maintain efficacy by improving coverage and application. Let's kill the weeds the first time we spray. Next slide. Few application notes, some fungicide labels do have some restrictions around adjuvants going into them. And this going back to some of the early when corn fungicides were first making a big play in the marketplace, they found that alkyl phenol ethoxylates or nonylphenol ethoxylate surfactants were causing arrested ear syndromes. So naturally, we threw all of the surfactants under the bus based off of this. But this is a problem at certain times of applications of fungicides. Again, you got to work with your fungicide manufacturer on this and your surfactant supplier and work around these details. But you want to avoid running into a problem with arrested ear. And so that's something, again, you got to look at closely on those just before tassel applications. When surfactants are used, they use the correct to correct compatibility problems. They generally need to be added first. So again, usually experience is best practice here. If you know you're going to have a problem, putting the compatibility agents in first are critical. Again, we mentioned the anionics work best for compatibility aids. Extremely hard water may also form incompatibilities with anionic surfactants. So again, you got to look at your water hardness issues. Again, I think these are things that if we look at from our application, our history, and knowing what we're going to be spraying and what our water conditions are critical to getting this right. And generally speaking, potential for crop injury is less with surfactant system than it is for oil or fertilizer-based type adjuvant systems. Next slide. Overcoming some objections. One that I've heard a lot my entire career, if they were really needed, why didn't the manufacturer build them in? Well, that one size fits all applications is a big variable. And then, as I mentioned, that rate per acre and spray volume is a big problem with trying to put everything you need into that herbicide. There just isn't room. And then if we jump from 10 to 20 gallons per acre, it greatly affects our rate. So that's a big reason why that is not a good argument. Pesticide labels do not recommend, and sometimes they don't. But again, I think it goes back to that. They also imply, and this is why it's really important to get the help from that local expert that's supplying you or helping you with your adjuvant selection, can really help you on some of these labels that you're using a lot. And you know that it's the right thing to do to get an adjuvant, get a help from them. And the drift and deposition aids that we're going to talk about here in another 2 months away, it's a big part of that. And we'll talk about that, I think, in early April. They cause foam problems. And while some adjuvants do, a lot of people now have worked that out, but you may have to, I don't think there are too many applicators that don't have a foam control agent sitting in their cab with them. So when they throw something in there, if they got foam, that they can knock that down right away. And then lastly, they cost too much. And while, especially now for big growers, and you look at putting adjuvants over 5,000 acres, yeah, that number gets big. But compared to the risk of not using them, it's very, very minimal. You could easily lose $12 to $36 an acre in performance and then have to respray. So those are the things. I think the risk of not using an adjuvant is significantly higher than using the right one. Next slide. So what did it all mean? Again, look at the label. If it's required on there, make sure you've got it in there. Again, think about that type of AI you're using. Is it a contact or is it systemic? That will direct you in the right type of adjuvant system. And then what kind of problems are you trying to solve? If it's hot and dry, you need coverage. You need to create evaporation. Do you have to worry about wash-offs? You have to worry about compatibility. All these things need to be looked at as you're looking at choosing your surfactant system. Next slide. Last time I talked about certified adjuvants. The real thing that this program's done, it's been ongoing for over 20 years, that EPA does not regulate adjuvants. Some states do, but most do not. So the ingredients can be picked up need to be picked off an EPA approved list. However, there's nobody to regulate that of what's actually being used and no laws against it. So what the certification does, if it's got that CPDA certified logo on there, ensures that the product meets the claims indicated on the label. It ensures that growers' product ingredients meet EPA regulations, so they're approved for use, just like the inerts that go in the herbicide, insecticide, and fungicide jar. And then in order to get certified, they have to have documented toxicological data. So that's a big factor from a safety standpoint. You know what's going in the tank has been screened for its toxicological effects, and it's safe for you to use. And they also give, on the case of surfactants, as of today anyway, it shows the percent true surfactant in the product that you're buying. Next slide. So again, how do you pick the right adjuvant? CPDA certified adjuvant list is a good one to look at. Try and get all the training you can. That's what we're trying to help you do with this webinar series. There's some other good resources out there. The Compendium of Herbicide Adjuvants put out by Purdue Extension in Southern Illinois, updated annually. At least it classifies all of these adjuvant systems into groups. Another excellent publication that's starting to get a little gray hair on itself, but it's science hasn't changed around it. The Adjuvants and the Power of Spray Droplet from Purdue University is just an excellent publication to help you go through a lot of what we talked about today. Ask for research data. And then again, as I said throughout this, consult your distributor, your retailer, adjuvant expert to help you make the right choices. Next slide. With that, Hunter, I think we're to the question and answers. And
yeah, that's
again,
great.
thank you to Stepan. I got to remind you that we really appreciate their help. Great adjuvant producers that service the entire industry from Stepan Ag Solutions.
So Joe, thank you again for a great presentation, and thank you for our partner CPDA and Stepan for sponsoring this webinar. I'm just going to ask the questions as they were received in the chat. So the first question is, you may cover this later in the presentation, but do you have any recommendations for surfactants that we could use for aquatic applications with aqueous solutions?
Well, the only one, I don't have names of any, but that's one advantage, the CPDA certified adjuvants. If you look at that list, they do show whether they are aquatic approved or not. That's one of regular stipulations on that. So that's a source you can look at and screen through them on. That's probably the quickest way to go.
The next question is, if surface tension is reduced on the leaf surface for spreading, what happens to droplet size in the air as shear forces at the spray tip rip the solution apart into smaller droplets?
It's an excellent question. Don't know exactly how to answer it, but certainly some surfactants, not all, some will have an effect as it comes out of the nozzle. So it can affect droplet size very much so. Especially, like I say, you look at, there's two herbicides in particular that are famous for creating more fines, and that is Liberty herbicide and most of the glyphosate formulas, and they do differ, but the original Roundup, PowerMax, WeatherMax, they created a great deal more fines. So they at the nozzle sheet breakup system, they do have a great effect. I don't think once they're in the air, once that droplet is out of the nozzle and on its way to the target, I don't think it's going to affect it at that point.
And we have one more question, which I'll cover in a second, but I wanted to make sure if you have a question for Joe, now's the time. You can use the Q&A function. We just had one come in. How adjuvants droplet size affect in COVID-19 vaccinations?
Well, not sure what adjuvant or surfactant they used in the COVID vaccines, but most pharmaceuticals are using typically same kind of things that we're using in agriculture. So I don't have any specifics on the COVID application.
Any other questions for Joe? We did have a question come in asking for a repetition of the email to request the presentation. We do record our webinars with CPDA. That webinar is available on the ARA website, aradc.org, available to all ARA members. You can access those on our member homepage. If you need help logging in, or if you're unsure if your company is a member of ARA, email info@aradc.org. Joe, one last question. Couple questions came through just now. Forgive my pronunciation. Trisiloxanes can be mixed with oils. I'm not sure what the question is there. One question is, maybe this is the answer to another question. Do you know if the N group on the trisiloxane adjuvant makes a large performance for longevity? I am a silicone chemist.
I do not. I guess I don't. Is this trisoxylane? Is that the term?
Yeah, that's probably how you pronounce it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, again, I don't, would you repeat the question? I'm trying to figure out what exactly there.
Do you know if the N group, OH, OCH3, and OBU, etc., on that adjuvant make a large performance or longevity?
I don't know. We're missing Johnny Roberts here, who is Johnny's the technical. I'm the adjuvant agronomist here. So some of these you get too deep in the chemistry. We need Johnny. Yeah.
Another question. Do you have any resources where we can learn more about stickers?
Unfortunately, we don't. And like I say, I think that was, if I look back over the years that I've done this, I think we missed out in a lot of opportunities in using stickers. I think, again, you go back, who is the key people that were working on adjuvants at the university system and such were, again, they were focused a lot on these row crop ag deals, and they just didn't look at the stickers in depth enough. And I always counted on them or the manufacturers, I think, is who we probably got to go to try and get some more clarifications on the stickers. I do think they could be utilized. If I was even 40 rather than 70, that's probably an area I'd look at more. So.
Another question, can adjuvants prevent in-tank interactions that lead to antagonism?
Well, some adjuvants, it depends on how you term an adjuvant. the water conditioners that we'll look at next month, certainly those do. And they are, when they're utilized for water conditioning, they are technically adjuvants, whether that be the amide formulas or the AMS, but even some surfactants too can help with integrity.
What type of surfactants or adjuvants are available, or do you suggest for adjusting spray water pH?
Well, those are buffers that we're looking at there again. So they're either alkaline or depending on which way you want to go, alkaline or acidic deals. So technically, again, not surfactants, but they still fall in under that category. Again, Johnny Roberts is a better source there probably also.
What surface tension should we expect in the spray tank for a good 90-10 and silicone spreader?
Well, I think you're down in the, and again, they vary tremendously. Again, it goes back to that spray volume and such, but most people are shooting in that 30 degree, 30 to 35. ASTM has a standard on that, and I don't recall exactly what it is, but I know the ASTM has a standard to meet, and it's fairly high. It's in the 50s. It's a little higher than what most of the experts would say.
Another question is, does the herbicide group number on the herbicide label determine the type of adjuvants to use?
In general, yes, but not necessarily exactly. There still could be differences in the individual herbicide formulation that they use.
Another question, some herbicides are formulated with a salt. What role does the salt have in reducing surface tension and plant penetration?
Well, I mean, it has a role, but I guess I couldn't tell which, again, it all goes back to what salt they use. And again, it goes back to generally, if they're going to interfere in any way, they're going to have a surfactant system in there that's going to help that. Again, I'd have to go back to the individual herbicide system.
The next question, I believe, was answered in the last webinar, but it's what are the general differences and similarities between paraffinic oil and seed oils? I do believe that Johnny Roberts, who is a chemist, went over that in the last presentation, which is also available on the ARA website.
And generally, I mean, paraffinics were around first forever, were the main component, but when the MSOs just solubilize herbicide waxes more quickly and more efficiently. And that's why if you really need an oil-loving herbicide that you want to penetrate a leaf surface, your money's always going to be best spent on a methylated seed oil system.
The next question, typically we get responses for changes in the droplet size to reduce environmental contamination. Is there a possibility to get or create database available for data beyond droplet size and performance regarding the effectiveness?
Boy, I'm trying to figure out what exactly the question was there. I mean,
is there a database available regarding performance?
Unfortunately, there's not really. I think individual distributors probably have a database on their drift and deposition agents. Most all of them would have some data that would give you a pretty good indication. And their data sources, again, they loan some of them to Johnny and I when we're building these. We'll show you a little bit of those things when we talk about the drift and deposition agents. But generally, it's going to be the manufacturer who's building a drift agent or the distributors that built it or are selling it probably have the best database there.
Next question. In some Latin American countries, farmers use and are advised to use adjuvants to encapsulate the chemical being applied. For this purpose, they mix the herbicide and the adjuvant in a 1-to-1 ratio by volume and then dilute with water. Does that make any sense? There are quite complex encapsulated formulations for slow release, and the described practice does not convince me.
I think there have been encapsulators sold in the drift and deposition agent. And did they work? Yes, they do. The problem with encapsulation is then depending on what else you put in there, does it affect that or not? As soon as we run into these trying to put 3 or 4 or 5 herbicides, insecticides, fungicides in the tank, it really messes things up. So I think that's the real gist of the problem is in the US ag, we're putting way too many things into the spray tank to make things simple. And that's where I believe, in my opinion anyway, the encapsulators are going to cause some problems for you, where if you have one individual herbicide, and I've seen specifically, you can encapsulate it and make it work better. But in US, especially in row crop ag, we're throwing so many things in there, the degree of difficulty becomes harder.
Where can I find the reference for the herbicide group number and adjuvant general recommendations?
Who has the group number? Most, I believe it might be dated, but that Purdue instrument booklet would have it in. They're updated annually by the Weed Science Society. So I'd reference Weed Science Society of America. You go to look at North Dakota State and Purdue have been the 2 best universities at doing this on a consistent basis. And that's where I would send you to go look at their weed science spaces at both Purdue and North Dakota State University. You'll be able to find it if you search a little bit on either of those 2 universities.
Do you think, based on your experience, the use of COC adjuvants, which seems to be an emulsifier, will enhance performance an emulsifiable concentrate formulated herbicide, or makes no difference? ?
So the question is, will a COC work with an EC herbicide?
Correct.
Well, I think it still can if it's one that does require it. I mean, you've already got a paraffinic or MSO based material in there in an EC already. It's the degree of how much is in there. It probably goes back to that rate versus gallon per acre deal, whether you have enough.
Next question is, I'd like to address the regulation of adjuvants. Please understand that EPA does not regulate adjuvants, and in order to be used on food crops, they must be listed in the 40 CFR and have a tolerance or exemption from tolerance to be legal for use. I'm not sure what the question is there, but any.
Well, it's one area you need to look at more, because more and more states are at least trying to regulate adjuvants, although they're not really regulating. I guess in most cases, many of them are just wanting you to register them so they can collect a fee on that. And they're probably more interested in, I probably shouldn't say it out loud. They're interested in looking at safety, I would say, maybe be the safest thing to do it while collecting a fee from people that are doing it. The only true people that are making you do a lot of work to making sure they're safe today is California and state of Washington and Oregon are looking specifically at those. The others are making you list them, but aren't asking those EPA required questions probably. But you do have to look, more and more states are starting to regulate them. So you got to look at that in this business.
Well, thanks for all your time today, Joe. In the interest of time, I'm going to click over to the next slide, where you will see the instructions on how to get your CEU credits. So you can scan the QR code on your screen to access that credit. And then again, for those of you that live and work in California, you can email info@cpda.com to get your short quiz that you must take to receive your credit. And then we'll come back to this slide in a second, but also wanted to make everyone aware of the next webinar that we'll be doing in conjunction with CPDA. It'll be hosted and sponsored by CopCoat Farm and Forest Protection. That'll be on using water conditioners to protect your chemical investment. So that'll be March 16th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Again, we want to thank Stepan for sponsoring today's webinar. Certainly appreciate their contributions to CPDA and helping sponsor this webinar today. I'm going to throw up this slide again as well on the CEU credits in case you missed it just a second ago. So make sure and scan the QR code to get your credits. And again, wanted to open it up to you, Joe, if you had any parting thoughts for the webinar attendees today.
No, I just want to thank everybody, all the attendees, and they will be listed. And like I say, I know one question you had is you know, we're not going to provide it, going to send you a copy, but even if you want to do an education deal, Hunter, I think they can go to your website and put it up on the screen and show people and teach off it if they want to do that. They can do that on the last one and these future ones too. So we'll look forward to seeing you at the March 16th talking about water conditioners. So.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance in today's webinar. Again, we are proud as the Agricultural Retailers Association with the partnership we have with CPDA in hosting these webinars. I'm going to put up the CEU credit slide one more time in case you missed it. This will stay up for the next few minutes, and then we will end the webinar. Thank you again for your attendance.